Chapter 7. We're going to take a look at converting a procedural-based script for connecting to a MySQL database, and we're going to turn that into a class. We're also going to discuss why it's a good idea to turn it into a class, what are the advantages, and how much more flexibility it will provide us. I'm going to enter NetBeans, and I've created two files for part 7, an index.php as always, and MySQL database. So let's begin. And let me go ahead and grab just a quick starter. And we need to go ahead and include this. So actually, we're not going to be doing much object-oriented programming in this first chapter. You'll want to come back for chapter 8, where we take the product of this script and begin turning it into object-oriented programming and a class. So we will go ahead and include MySQL DB. Save that. And now, procedural. Okay. So now let's enter here, and we're going to build it with just procedures statements. So we'll create a bunch of functions. So we want to connect to a database. I'm going to be working with MySQL. So you can either use PHP MyAdmin or some kind of client. I'm using Queryus for the Mac. And I have a DB database. And within this DB database, I've created a table with 2 rows, very, very simple, ID, title, and body within a posts table. Okay, so now we need to connect to that. Okay, so within my function, and we'll call it connect, let's go ahead and we'll create a new variable called con, and this will be equal, ironically, we're going to be working with a class-based database access, and it's going to be called new MySQLi for MySQL improved. So this is the irony, if we're working with procedures, but we're also working with object-oriented programming. We're working with the class. So this MySQL improved class requires a few things from us. The host, mine's localhost, the username, I'm all on my local, so it's all going to be root, but yours would be locked down. And the name of that database is DB. So host, username, password, DB. Database, and we called ours DB. But if there was a problem connecting, let's die and say there was a problem connecting to the DB. All right, that looks good. So I can save this, but of course, let's go ahead and open up PHP tags. There we go, much better. So this will take care of our connect script. All we need to do now is call it. But we're creating this con, we need to make sure that we return it, correct? So I can simply at the bottom, I can do return the connection. So now we'll go into, actually let me take a look at this really quickly. There we go, let's just add that. Okay, so we're all set. Let's go back to index.php. We've included it, now we simply need to call it, and we'll say connection equals connect. So the reason I'm making this function connect equal to a variable is because something's being returned from it. So I need to make sure that I trap that in this variable, and we'll call it con as well. Okay, so let's try it out. Let's go into our project, run file, and we don't get anything. So just to make sure it's working, why don't we change the name of the database? Okay, and we do get warning unknown database, so that is working correctly. There we go. All right, so now that we've connected to the database, now we need to actually write a function that will, we'll do a simple select all type function. We can call this get. Function get. So let's go ahead and we're going to create a new statement. We'll call this variable, and we're going to prepare, but we need to be able to have access to this. So we need to make sure that we pass it through when we call this new function. So I can say something like get, and we're going to pass in the connection that was returned here. So this calls connect, it's equal to that connection, and now we're passing that connection to the get method, and we'll have that represented as con as well. Okay, so now we can say statement equals this connection, and we're going to prepare, we're calling the prepare method, and we'll pass in a query here, a SQL query, and let's see what we have to work with here. And I'm going to show you why this isn't the best practice. All right, we're getting ID, title, and body. So select ID, title, body from, and the name of the table was posts. Okay. And if that doesn't work, we'll die. Problem with query. There we go. So next, we've prepared our statement. By the way, this is called working with prepared statements. It's a much more secure way and a much more efficient, especially when working with larger applications. So you might be familiar with MySQL_Connect. Yeah, you can do that, and it works fine for smaller projects. But using prepared statements is going to be much more secure. You don't have to worry about things like SQL injection as much, and it's more efficient for large projects. So now we've prepared it. Let's go ahead and execute it. There we go. And now we've gotten those rows. We need to bind the results. And we need to bind them if we're selecting from 3 fields here, ID, title, and body. We need to make sure that we bind the results to 3 variables as well. We'll call it ID, title, and body as well. Okay, so now we'll do a for each statement, or why don't we do a while? And we'll say while row equals statement.fetch. Actually, if we wanted, we could even do while statement fetch, because I don't even think we'll be using this. But if you wanted, you could do that as well. Okay, so we'll say, let's create a new item, and that's going to be equal to an array. And we're simply going to fill up this array with information that was returned from the database. So we'll make it an associative array, and the title is going to be equal to the title. So basically what this is happening is it's going to filter through each row. So first, in this case, title is going to be equal to title goes here. And then the while statement will go to the next iteration, and title will be equal to the next one. So we'll do title, and we're going to get body. Equals body, and if we want, we can also do one more at the very top, and we'll say ID. And that's going to be equal to ID. Okay, so now we have this items array, but if we go through a while statement, we're going to be overriding this variable every single time. So what we need to do is append this as a new item of a different array. So I'll say something like rows equals array. And now, just below here, we'll say rows, create a new item in that array, and that item is going to be equal to an array itself. So rows is an array, and for each while statement, we're going to add another array item to this rows array. Hopefully that makes sense. And then finally, with the function, we don't want to echo anything out. We just simply want to return information. So we're going to return rows. We're returning an array containing the information that was retrieved from the database. This is procedured programming. So we've got that, but we need to make sure that we trap that once again. So I'll call this results equals get. Now all we have to do is filter through them, the results, and display them on the page. So we'll say for each results as something like row. We'll use the shorthand here. And what to do? We'll go h2, php, and we're going to echo row, because each one's going to be represented by row, and that means row will then have access to title, body, or ID. So we'll say row, and we're going to put the title within an h2 tag. And within, we could do a div. We'll just do a paragraph tag for here, echo row body. Okay, let's clean this up just a little bit. And make sure we go PHP and for each. Okay. Just do a little bit more cleaning up, and then we should be all set to go. So for each result as row, we're going to add a heading 2 tag for the title, and then a paragraph tag which wraps the body, and then we call end for each. And that should do it. So let's come back, and hopefully we didn't make any mistakes. Run the file, and we did get a problem with query. So let's go and check that out. So select ID, title, body from posts. So let's make sure we got that right. ID, title, body from posts. And of course, we don't need a comma at the very end. Sorry about that. Let's go back. But luckily, we had that error checking in place. Run file again. And we got one more, call the undefined method MySQL statement bind result. And I'll show you what this is. Right here, it's having trouble with this right here. And the only problem right there is results, nope, bind result. There we go, that should fix it. And of course, we get our title goes here, the heading. And then if we add more to our database right here, third title, third body, save that. And if we refresh the page, now we have our third item. Okay, so good. This is, a fairly helpful function, but let's go over why we can do a lot better. Okay, first of all, we're hard coding our query in here. Also, we're selecting what if in the next project we need to select from a different table name. Well, here it's hard coded in. Okay, well, maybe we can fix that. We can do table name. So now when the user calls from their main page get, they can pass the name of the table and then their connection. That makes it a little bit more flexible, doesn't it? So we can just simply replace post with table name. So then when I go back and call it, we'll say get post. If I come back and run the file again, we get the same thing. Okay, well that helps a little bit, definitely. But we still have this problem. We're hard coding our select statement in here. So what we could do is maybe call a query method, and that query method is responsible for creating a variable that contains the query. Yeah, we could do that. But then we also have this problem when working with prepared statements where we need to know what rows are being returned from the database. So in this case, it's a small project. We know, okay, if we come back into queries, okay, we know there's 3 fields, ID, title, and body. But what happens when maybe you're offering this for download on a site like github.com? They don't need to do this. Remember, if we want to make a black box where all they have to do is plug into it and get their information out, we're forcing them to go into the functions file and replace bind result with however many fields. So shouldn't we find a way to determine how many fields are being retrieved from and then dynamically create this? Definitely. And then once again, we have the same thing down here where we're hard coding too much and it's not reusable. Remember, that's the key to classes. Not only is it a way to group common functions together, so it's more easy to use, but it adds so much flexibility where you don't have to edit your functions.php file for every project. You simply plug into it, give a little bit of information, and it brings it out to you. What good is a black box if you have to open it up and change everything around every time you use it? That defeats the purpose of this. Doesn't that make sense? So that's all we're going to do for this database. We could do an update and delete, and we'll get to those. But I want you to be thinking about why this isn't efficient. Also, here we're having to hard code these in. We have to connect it. If we wanted to connect again, it would be much more complicated. There doesn't really seem to appear to be any real connection between this function and this function. There's a lot of problems with this, but with the class that we're going to build in the next lesson, we're going to improve this greatly. Now, I want to prepare you. It's going to be a lot more complicated. And the reason is, when you want to make things as flexible as possible, you have to be smart enough to think, what will the user do? What will they add? What could they add? What should I expect to get back? And then also, you can never hard code specifics. That's a big rule with class-based methods. Never hard code anything in as we've done here. You got to figure this out for yourself. So in the next lesson, the method needs to figure it out for itself, not you. So in the next lesson, we're going to take this, we're going to turn it into a MySQL DB class, and then we're going to improve it so it's as flexible as possible.